I went to my first sweat lodge in 1976. Archie Fire Lame Deer was living in Santa Barbara at the time, and I was in Ventura. And there were sweat lodges held every Friday night in El Rio. I was a student at Ventura College, a member of MECHA, and we were involved in a case of Paul Skyhorse and Richard Mohawk. So we were doing some organizing around Native issues. And the American Indian Movement activists started coming to town, and we started working with them. And then we got invitations, to come to the sweat lodge. And I went to the sweat lodge, and I must admit that I kind of went there with the wrong intention. I didn't know what I was getting into, or quite what I was getting into, and I thought I wanted to prove something, and that was my fault for thinking that way. So I went to the sweat lodge, and I endured, and I came out, and I kind of proved, I can do this, but I really didn't get the spirituality of the sweat lodge. I didn't understand it yet. I had to go back again and again to other sweat lodges, and then after a few times, I finally got it, of how the sweat lodge purification ceremony can work in a person's life. So I started in 1976, and I continued going to sweat lodges wherever I could, wherever there was one locally in the Southern California area. And I did that for like 10 years, from 1976 until 1986. And during that period of time, there were no Sundancers in Ventura County. And so we were dependent on people traveling through, to conduct the sweat lodges for us. At some point, Archie moved to South Dakota, back to South Dakota, and there wasn't anyone here during that period of time. And one summer, a couple of guys came down. One was Ken Littlefish, and he is the brother of Paul Skyhorse, who I mentioned earlier. And he was with this other guy by the name of Michael Berry. Ken Littlefish was born back in Minnesota, but he had been up on the Pacific Northwest, and Michael Berry was from Oregon. And they spent the summer of 1986 down here, and they were running sweat lodges for us on a pretty regular basis. But, they weren't going to stick around forever. So one night, I went to a sweat lodge, and I did what most people do. I grabbed my towel and my trunks, and I was standing around the fire in the dark, like a bunch of us were, just waiting for the sweat lodge to start, when Little Fish came up to me and kind of announced, told me, he said, "You're going to run the sweat lodge tonight." And that news was pretty staggering to me. I'm glad that there was a stump behind me. I sat down to just take this all in, because I was thinking, as many times as I've been to a sweat lodge over the last 10 years, why didn't I pay attention? Why didn't I ever see myself running a sweat lodge? But now they're telling me it's your turn. And what they explained to me was that they were getting ready to leave the area. And we had quite a few people, upward to maybe 50 people, who liked to sweat in 1986 around this area. And he says, "One of you guys have to learn how to do this." And they picked me, and that really, I couldn't begin to tell you how much that changed my life. Because sometimes I think about, what if they went to the guy standing next to me and told him, you're going to run the Sweat Lodge tonight. And it would have changed his life completely, like it did mine. But they did come to me and they told me, I tried to get out of it. I said, well, I don't know the songs. They said, don't worry about the songs. We're going to be in there with you. You just have to run this Sweat Lodge. So I entered the Sweat Lodge. I remember looking out of the Sweat Lodge and being totally bewildered and thinking, well, if this is my role, if this is what I'm going to have to do, I want to do it properly. And I knew right away that I was going to have to make a commitment to go to Sundance and become a Sundancer. I knew that. And so I ran that first Sweat Lodge. And that night, a couple of guys, one was from South Dakota, Tony Horse Road. He was out here, and this other brother, and they kept me up all night, kind of preparing me for a Sundancer's life. And then the next night, I went out and saw Archie Fire, Lame Deer, and I asked him if he would sponsor me into the Sundance. I told him that I have been coming to the Sweat Lodges now for 10 years, and I think it's time. And he apparently agreed, because he made my Sundance journey very easy for me. And he told me what Sundances he was going to be involved in that summer. And one of them was like at Big Mountain, Arizona. One of them was at Crow Dog's Paradise. Another, and that's on the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota. And two others in South Dakota, one in Mission and one in Greengrass. And he told me to think about it, pray on it, and come to the Sweat Lodge the next week and tell him where I'd like to dance. And I don't know what made me choose Crow Dog's Paradise on the Rosebud Reservation, but I did. That was, and I went to Archie and I told him Crow Dog's Paradise. And he seemed really pleased that that's the place that I chose. So in the summer of 1986, I Sundanced for my first time. And it's a 4-year commitment. So I Sundanced in 86, 87, 88, and 89. And people say it's a 4-year commitment, but most of them kind of know you become a lifer, and so, yeah, sure enough, I continued dancing well past my initial commitment. I did 2 commitments, and then I was back in, living over here, and by this time Archie's gone and everybody's gone, and there were no sweat lodges for the people, for the larger community as we know them today. And so I started running sweat lodges up in the hills behind Ojai at a place called Chorro Grande, and we were there from about 1986 to about, I think it was 1996, and then that land got sold, and some other land opened up for us in Fillmore, a place called Rancho San Cayetano. It was right at the foothill of the San Cayetano Mountains, and it was on organic orange and avocado ranch. And it was very, very nice. People really liked it there. And that's when we really started building the community that we today call the Hummingbird Circle. Well, you know, in this country, the land is usually private property, and what happens to private property is that it gets sold. So that ranch got sold, and we had to find another place. The next place that opened up for us was a horse ranch in Mora Park that was called Spirit Dancer, the Spirit Dancer Ranch, and that was a great name. And so we moved out to Mora Park and held ceremonies there for several years. And then the current land opened up for us there here in Ventura County in Santa Paula area. Again, we're back in the avocado grove, and all through these years, from 1986 till today, you know, our community just kind of grew. I mean, when we started, there was no email or much less Facebook and all the social media. I used to mail out the schedule to people with a stamp in an envelope, you know, and that's how I would let people know about the ceremonies. And, you know, time goes on, and I go from being in my mid-20s, you know, now to being in my mid-60s, and that's what I've been doing all this time.